Okay, good afternoon. Maybe we can start. It's already, yes, 3 o'clock here in Turkey. So I said good afternoon, but of course it could be good morning or good evening. It depends on where are you. Since this is a webinar, it depends on your time zone, whether it's afternoon, morning or evening. But from my side, I like to say good afternoon. Thank you so much for being with us in this webinar. My name is Ahmet İçduygu. I'm the director of the Migration Research Center at Koc University and also faculty member in the same university. This webinar is organized by MiReKoc, collaboration with the IOM. Today we will have a great discussion with this organized panel with this formulation around IOM World Migration Report of 2020 and its implication for migration picture of Turkey. As we will discuss, the IOM World Report is annually published since year 2000, and the last year, which was the 10th version, the 10th time in 2020. This occasion is important because the first 3 chapters of this last year's publication already also translated into Turkish. I wish, of course, all the report is translated in, but of course it's a matter of resources. But also I hope that in the coming years we will have the opportunity and the resources to have the Turkish version, and I know that it will be mentioned. There will be the report already translated in several languages. This report, as we will discuss, covers various migration issues around the globe, and it's very important, of course, to understand the global picture changing with the different changes every year. What is also important that the position of each country case, which has its own place in this larger picture. So in this context, Turkey, which is very much affected by various forms of migratory movements, immigration, emigration, transit migration, asylum flows, the refugees over the decades. So the Turkish case also provides us with a setting where we can discuss the globally important migration issues. In fact, this was the kind of feedback behind us why we organized this webinar. As I said, this is the organization by MiReKoc with the collaboration with IOM, particularly and personally with the involvement of the Dr. MiReKoc. She is the head of the Migration Research Division of the IOM in Geneva. She was very happy to be a part of this webinar, but unfortunately this morning I got an email from her. There is an emergency health problem with a family member, so she apologized so much. But kindly, she suggested another colleague from Geneva, Dr. Céline Bauloz. She's the head of the research unit at the Migration Research Division in IOM, and luckily kindly she accepted to be with us and to talk about the IOM World Migration Report. So she's with us now. Our second panelist, Dr. Tommaso de Cataldo, also from the IOM office Ankara. And our third panelist, last but not least, Professor Ayhan Kaya of the Bilgi University, Istanbul. In terms of the flows of the meeting, each panelist will have the maximum 20 minutes. Then we will have a question and answer session from the audience. A note for the audience, you can write your question to the chat box of the Zoom. But also, if you like to ask your question yourself, using with this rising hand button of the Zoom, if you inform us end of the session, then we will make you enabled to ask your question yourself. This is a reminder for the panelists, but also information for the audience. We are recording this session, but not the question and the answer session, only the panelist talks which will be recorded. So without further ado, let's start with the introduction of the Céline Bauloz, and I will give her to the floor. But just before giving the floor, just very briefly, I will introduce her. As already I mentioned that she is the head of the research unit at the Migration Research Division in IOM, and the editor of the IOM Migration Research Series. She's also a senior fellow at the Global Migration Center, Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva, and she holds a PhD in international law from the same institute. Yes, Céline, the floor is yours. Again, thank you very much. I mean, just for this last minute arrangement, I mean, we really appreciate your presence here. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ahmet İçduygu. And on behalf of Dr. MiReKoc, I would like to express our sincere thanks to the whole team at MiReKoc for the organization, even though that's what jointly, I know you provided like a lot of logistical support as well for this webinar today. And I'd like to emphasize again, sincere apologies for Dr. McAuliffe, who cannot be here, unfortunately, because of a last minute emergency. I know she was very much looking forward to this webinar, and I will do my best to give justice to the presentation she was planning to do today with you. Let me share my screen as I have a PowerPoint presentation, and please let me know if there's any issue in seeing the presentation, which I hope will work on all sides now. Can you please just confirm that you see my screen correctly? Okay, excellent. I don't know if you see the presenter view, but in any case, it doesn't, I think, really matter, and we can go on this basis. So yes, I'm very pleased to present this afternoon the current editions of IOM's flagship publication, the World Migration Report 2020, with its first chapters, which have been translated into Turkish. I was noted by Ahmet before, and that's a first. So we're really pleased to have those first chapters. And for that, we have to thank, of course, IOM Turkey for the funding support with the translation. The report offers as well the occasion to reflect on the findings implication for Turkey. So I'm really glad to have colleagues as well here on board for more the Turkish sides of the analysis and presentation, and as well reflects on the impacts of COVID-19 on migration and mobility more broadly. So in this view, I'm just going to see if I can, I'm not sure that you have the presenter view. Let me check again if I can change that, because for me it's the normal view. Here we go, that's better. So in this view, the presentation will start by providing an overview of the report in terms of key contributions and highlights, before turning to aspects relating to analysis, projection, and reach of the reports. And finally, I'd like to conclude with some remarks on the current COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on migration and mobility. So providing a little bit of context first, it's worth underlining that the World Migration Report lies at the heart of IOM's mission. And indeed, you see that among our main objectives, we have the one to advance evidence-based understanding of migration issues, alongside other objectives, of course, that are as much as important, such as assistance in meeting the growing operational challenges of migration management, encouraging social and economic development through migration, and last but not least, upholding the human dignity and well-being of migrants. Such an evidence-based understanding of migration issues is crucial for us for supporting states, but also other stakeholders when it comes to devising and adapting migration policies and programmatic activities, but also, and here you have the words of our IOM Director General, Antonio Vitorino, in the foreword to the World Migration Report. It's also important for us and the responsibility of the organization to provide an objective and balanced account of migration globally, given the accrued importance and political salience of migration today, and today's as well dissemination of misinformation globally that affect the public discourse on migration. While the first edition of the World Migration Report was published back in 2000, the series has since been revised to further improve the report's global utility and reach, and to better meet and fulfill our mission when it comes to evidence-based research and information. Since the 2018 edition of the World Migration Report, we now have a different structure as before. Before, the report was more thematic, even though it wasn't launched as such in 2000, but it quickly moved to thematic issues, thematic editions. And now, since the 2018 edition, we have a two-part structure that we follow. So that was the case for the 2018 edition, the 2020, and it will be the same for the 2022. Part one provides an overview of data and information on migration and migrants at the global and regional levels. So those are the two chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 3. And it also delves into questions of the states of research on migration. And together with the first kind of chapeau chapter, which provides an overview of the reports, these chapters are institutionally written and they are repeated from one edition to another, and of course updated in light of new data and statistics that are published. Part 2 focuses on complex and emerging migration issues, and you have here the list of chapters that are included in the 2020 edition. So we had the lead chapter on migrants' contributions in an era of increasing disruption and disinformation, which is followed by a chapter on migration, inclusion, and social cohesion. We have a chapter on migration and health, another one on children and unsafe migration, one on human mobility and adaptation to environmental changes, another one on migrants caught in crisis, which we usually refer as MiReKoc, with reference to the MiReKoc initiative, and the last one on recent developments in the global governance of migration. Those chapters are mostly externally authored, even though we have lead IOM experts as well, who authored some of these chapters in collaboration with academic and applied researchers, as it is the case, for instance, for the first lead chapters on migrants' contribution, which was written by Dr. McAuliffe, one of my other colleagues, Adrian Chitimbo, as well as by the co-editor Bruno Cadria, the co-editor of this specific edition of the World Migration Reports. I'm turning now into the heart of the reports and providing you an overview here with chapter 1, which focuses on the current geopolitical context and anchor the report in this context in light of recent developments that have occurred since the previous edition of the report, which was here, the 2018. So these developments include some historic changes that we've had in global governance of migration. And I'm referring here, of course, to the adoption of the two global compacts for migration on the one hand and on refugees on the other hand, which builds upon decades actually of dialogues and different fora on migration at the global level, but also at the regional level. We also had mass displacement events that have occurred due to conflict, and of course, in the context of Turkey, important to recall, and it's quite straightforward for you, the conflict in the Syrian Arab Republic, but we also had mass displacement events that were due to extreme violence, or also because of severe and economic and political instability, such as in Venezuela. The chapter also highlights the growing recognition of environmental and climate change impacts on human mobility, of course. And finally, another recent developments, or I could say that it describes itself within long-term migration trends, is the increase in international migration. So here we have data from UNDESA in this report that was dated for 2019. But of course, since then, we had a new data set that was released by UNDESA. But we could see in the report that indeed in 2019, we had 272 million of international migrants. So that's an increase over the years, especially if you look at here, you have a snip of one of the table that is in the chapter. That's another view comparing the data that was in the World Migration Report, the first one published in 2000, with the current edition in 2020. So we see there's been an increase from 50 million international migrants to 272 million. But nevertheless, we have to nuance that increase when we look at proportional numbers, because we have also an increase in the global population. And that means that in 2019, we had 3.5% of, international migrants were representing 3.5% of the global population. So the increase has been quite steady and not drastic, as we may otherwise think, looking only at absolute numbers. Of course, today, and I guess you've seen the latest UNDESA data sets in terms of international migrant stock. UNDESA account for 281 million migrants worldwide, representing 3.6% of the global population, with an estimate that the COVID-19 pandemic may have impacted international migrants with a decrease of around 2 million international migrants. But of course, this is an estimate, so we cannot really confirm that. And we're waiting as well, like, for further data and confirmation as we go on. Let me turn to chapter 2. So chapter 2 then provides a global overview of migration and migrants. It's an overview of global data and trends on international migrants. So we're looking at stocks, and we also look at international migration, that is at flows. We discuss some specific migrant groups and their situation, and discuss as well, of course, and include IOM programmatic and operational data, knowing that otherwise we rely on global data. That is, for instance, the UNDESA data, UNHCR data when it comes to refugees, or IDMC data when it comes to internal displacement or displacement more broadly. But there's also a bunch of IOM programmatic and operational data that we use, and that's really useful to understand the situation of different migrants groups and different programmatic operations that we have. We have, for instance, data on missing migrants, on assisted voluntary return and reintegration, on resettlements, on displacement tracking, and victims of human trafficking. The key themes, you have them at the bottom of the slides here. Those are the kind of the subsection that we have, the sections that we have within the chapter. We look at first international migrants in terms of numbers and trends, then at international migration flows, with the caveat, of course, that it's difficult to have like clear estimates of flows, even more difficult, I would say, compared to stocks, of course, which is already a challenge, but flows are indeed difficult to capture because of the lack of collection of data on this side, on this front, from states and other stakeholders. We have a section on migrant workers, on international remittances, on refugees and asylum seekers, internally displaced persons, and stateless persons. Rather than presenting another view of chapter 3, it's quite interesting here to see some snips of chapter 3. So we have some graphs taken out of chapter 3, and we'd like to present them in a bit of different context, because that explains as well what is our objective with the World Migration Report. One of our objectives is to use data to show patterns, trends, and differences across regions. And it's more apparent when you have those two different regions, one alongside the other. So here we took the example of Asia, on the left-hand side and of Europe on the right-hand side. And this two graph presents migrants to, within, and from Asia and from Europe between 1990 and 2019. So we can see some interesting trends here, and especially when we do the comparison. And we see that migrants to Asia, that is immigration, if we refer to the common terminology, has remained relatively stable over the years if we compare to migrants to Europe. That has substantially increased, especially when it comes to migrants from Africa, but also migrants to, from Asia, excuse me. For both regions, intra-regional migration has been increasing. So that's the middle of the both graph. And finally, if we look at immigration, migration from Asia and from Europe, so that's the right side of each graph, we see that immigration has been on the rise in Asia, but relatively stable in comparison in Europe, with of course an increase of migration from Asia to Europe and to North America. So that's quite interesting to use this data to show like different trends that are sometimes not showed in other studies. And that's how we use this data here, for instance, for the different trends on immigration, intra-regional migration, and immigration. Another example here refers to, again, to the two same regions. We have Asia on the left-hand side and Europe on the right-hand side. And it concerns the top 10 countries with the largest population change. And we see that from 2009 until 2019. So normally, population change, the key factors are of course birth rates and mortality rates, but we see they can have big impact, that international migration can have big impact as well, and a significant impact in Asia when it comes to GCC countries, of course referring here to Qatar, for instance. But we can see a negative impact when it comes to Syria, and of course referring to massive displacements in Syria in the past years. When we look at Europe, the same, the different patterns exist, and you see that there's a lot more countries that have experienced a negative proportional population change since 2009 until 2019. This is mainly due to low fertility rates, but also to negative net migration rates. So that means that we have a higher number of people migrating from these countries than the number of people migrating to these countries. That's also interesting, I think, in terms of thinking about the future of migration policies in these countries, and perhaps in terms of labor needs for their national labor markets. We use that as well to show complexities. So here it's quite evident when you see the figure with the top 10 African countries by total refugees and asylum seekers. It relies on UNHCR data, of course, but we try to highlight the fact that when we refer, for instance, to some countries as major destination or major source of refugees, they can also be both. And that's quite evident in the graph when you look especially at Sudan or the Democratic Republic of Congo, which are both major source of refugees and asylum seekers, but also hosting a large and substantive number of asylum seekers and refugees specifically. And finally, we use data to show a key feature of migration globally. You have here the top 20 destinations on the left side and origin on the right side, countries of international migrants in 2019. So that's in millions. And if we look at these two graphs, we see that Turkey is in the top 20 origin countries of migrants worldwide, but it is of course also in the top 20 destination countries, and this is mainly due to the displacements of Syrian refugees within the country. So of course those data that are released by UNDESA also include refugees when they do refer to international migrants. Let me just give you here some interesting facts from the World Migration Reports that may be surprising for some, less for others, of course, especially with the expert audience that we have today and the panel. So we've seen that France is the 6th top receiving country of international remittances, and Germany is at the 9th place. So it's quite striking usually, because when we think about receiving country of international remittances, it's not usually the first country we think of. It reveals that research we have done reveals that it's mainly due to cross-border as well, cross-border workers. And a lot of French nationals, for instance, are working in Switzerland or in Germany. So that's mainly due to that. Second fact, and I'm sure largely known by the panelists today and the audience, is that the Syrian Republic is by far the largest origin country of refugees in the world. It was the 3rd largest host country of refugees as well beforehand, especially because due to the 1 million refugees that were mainly from Iraq, and that Turkey is now the largest host country of refugees, mainly due to Syrians. Another fact, Canada is, or at least in the World Migration Report 2020, we'll see if that will change in the future, but Canada is the top refugee resettlement countries in 2018. Beforehand and since 1980, it was the United States, which was the first, so we'll see if there's going to be a change in that in the future, given the new change of administration and the impact it may have on resettlement decisions. A bit more now on the production of the reports. So the reports relies on partnerships for the production, especially of the thematic chapters. You have here the list of external co-authors for the World Migration Report 2020, and also of academic reviewers who have reviewed mostly the thematic chapters, but also the institutional one of Part 1. And we rely on their expertise, also on the specific topic, but also to ensure that we have a diversity of views and opinions from diverse geographical areas. So that's really important for us, that not only destination countries' views are represented in the reports, but also the views and the research that is being done in origin countries and countries of transit. And we have the chance, I must say, to work with leading experts. And Ahmet, if I'm not mistaken, you're reviewing for the next one, and you've always been like a great supporter in any case of the World Migration Reports. We now have the chance to get the World Migration Reports available in multiple languages. So for the 2020 edition, we got all the UN languages, that is Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. So the report is entirely translated into those languages. And for Turkish, Portuguese, German, and Swahili, we had the chance to translate the core chapters of the report. Those are chapter 1 to chapter 3. And of course, as I said, the Turkish translation was supported by IOM Ankara, and as well by our internal funding mechanism, MiReKoc, within IOM. And for the others, we also had support from USA, for IOM, Canada, Switzerland, and Germany, to mention most of them. Some further thoughts on COVID-19, and I know I'm going beyond the time that was allocated to me, but I guess if it's fine with you, I can take some additional 5 minutes, and I guess there will be a nice transition as well with the next presentations. with some further thoughts on COVID-19 and its impact on migration and mobility. So we all agree that it has been a seismic geopolitical event that is transforming migration and mobility system globally. I can refer to one of the papers here that has been written by Dr. MiReKoc, where she depicted COVID-19 as the great disruptor. It is the case with the travel restrictions that we had that have caused unprecedented disruption for migration and mobility. And I mentioned previously as well, UNDESA estimates on the impact of international migrants, of the impact of COVID-19 on international migrants, with an estimated decrease of the number of international migrants by 2 million. And of course, the initial research and analysis shows that those that are the most impacted are the most vulnerable fringe of the population, and that includes, of course, migrants and refugees in different settings, be it in crisis situation, but also in destinations countries, and so on. So what COVID-19 has in fact done is to not only exacerbate pre-existing vulnerabilities, but also revealing the inequalities that we have in our societies. And that's why it has impacted mostly the more vulnerable ones, including migrants. The post-pandemic recovery will be strongly linked to migration and mobility systems. That's a big question mark of where we're going here in terms of how migration would be impacted, in terms of as well the future of work. We're now working more virtually. So the question mark is how will labor migration, for instance, translate in the future? What is quite interesting is that even though the World Migration Report 2020 does not refer to COVID-19 because it was published right before in November 2019, a lot of the thematic chapters hold, are totally relevant to the analysis that we have today. So I refer specifically to migrants' contribution when we think about migrants' contribution during the pandemic, and we've seen that migrant workers were at the front line, for instance. But I'm sort of referring to the chapter on migration and health, which is highly relevant in the current context, or other chapters as well, including inclusion of migrants, which is one of the big topics right now, especially as we talk about access to healthcare, but also when we talk about stigmatization or discrimination and access to vaccine now, as we move forward into vaccination campaigns in countries in 2021. What is quite interesting as well is that international remittances were first estimated to have decreased significantly. It is the case, but it's quite interesting that in some countries we have seen an increase in international remittances. So that's really important to highlight that aspect as well, because it's central to the recovery of some countries and of origin countries as well, in terms of families that are receiving those remittances. We will have, of course, that goes without saying, we will have a specific thematic chapter on COVID-19 in the next World Migration Report, the World Migration Report 2022, which will be launched this year in November. And COVID-19 would also feature in all of the other chapters, of course, because that's been, that's part of the future of migration, the analysis we'll all have to make. I would just like to as well redirect you to some of the analysis we've been making, and it's more a compilation of existing, an exploration of existing analysis out there in the analytical snapshots on COVID-19 impacts on migration and mobility that are available on our website. We have now more than 70 analytical snapshots that look at different aspects of the COVID-19 impacts on migration and mobility. They summarize the latest research, information, and analysis on these impacts. We've had the chance to translate, unfortunately not in Turkish, but in Nevertheless, in some languages, that is Russian, Arabic, English, French, Chinese, and Spanish, we translated the first 50 analytical snapshots. And we have topics such as public attitudes on migration and migrants, disruptions to migrants' education. We also have human trafficking, and we update them from time to time as new research is released and published out there. So please visit our website if you're interested to have more information. And thank you very much with that. I will, I'm sorry I have been a bit longer than expected. I like to talk, unfortunately. But thank you very much. And I give the floor to you, Ahmet, and to colleagues for their presentation. Thank you.
Céline, thank you very much. I mean, this was great. I mean, hearing from you, and no problem for the talking long. Thank you. I mean, you just highlighted the several points concerning the report. Plus also adding some discussion on the COVID context is very important, and it's nice to hear that in the next report will be also focusing on various issues related to COVID. Also, it was, I mean, I should confess that I didn't know that, for instance, this finding about the remittances, the case of French and Germany. So apparently the report is really giving some surprising results to us. Thanks for that. And also I heard that Mari, she prepared this PowerPoint and she agreed that we can share this with the audience. So from the audience, if you like to have the copy of this PowerPoint, you can just forward your email to us and we will share the PowerPoint with you. Thanks again, Céline, and now we can move to the Tommaso de Cataldo. Just before giving to him to the floor, actually, I just very brief introduction. He has the laurea in philosophy from the State University in Milan, Italy. He started working for IOM in 1998 and served in the Balkans, West Africa, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. And he is currently the coordinator of the Migration Management Program in IOM Turkey in Ankara. Well, thank you again, Tommaso. So, floor is yours. Tommaso, we cannot hear you because your microphone.
In fact, as I use paper and I forget technology. Thank you for to MiReKoc for inviting us. I would like to provide you a brief context of our mission in Turkey and the programs that we are carrying out in two sectors: migration management and humanitarian response. And I will read through this if you allow. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, the United Nations UN Migration Agency, opened its first offices in Turkey in 1991. IOM partnership with the government of Turkey was formalized in November 2004 when Turkey became an IOM member state. In 2017, IOM's Director General signed an amendment host country agreement with the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to reflect IOM's then recent UN membership, recognizing the privileges and immunities of IOM sub-offices throughout the country and further strengthening IOM's relationship with the government. IOM programming in Turkey addresses the full scope of migration issues, supporting ongoing national investment in strengthening the national migration governance framework. IOM Turkey is now one of the largest missions for IOM globally. We currently have over 1,000 staff members across the country, with our main office in Ankara, sub-offices in Istanbul and Gaziantep, and satellite offices in Izmir, Edirne, Hatay, Sanliurfa, Adana, and soon one in Mersin. IOM, in close coordination with the United Nations Resident Coordinator, the Directorate General for Migration Management, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and UN agencies, is establishing the UN Migration Network in Turkey. The objective of this network is to contribute to the national implementation of the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration and to support the government in managing migration-related issues. The migration context in Turkey is complex. Turkey is a country historically characterized by dynamic human mobility, with almost 4.5 million foreign nationals, of whom 3.6 million are seeking international protection. Most of those seeking international protection are Syrians, 3.6 million, who have been granted temporary protection status, making Turkey host the largest refugee population in the world. Besides hosting the largest refugee population, Turkey is increasingly attractive for regular migrants and is managing an important sustained inflow of irregular migrants that either are staying in the country or are attempting to continue their journey towards Europe. IOM Turkey is cooperating with national and provincial authorities and civil society actors to strengthen the national response. The mission is implementing projects in two main thematic areas: migration management and humanitarian responses. The latter includes the support to vulnerable individuals, such as refugees and migrants in Turkey, as well as displaced people in northwest Syria. In Turkey, the refugee response supports the population of Syrians under temporary protection and asylum seekers through programs implemented in the framework of the Regional Refugee and Resilience Plan, also known as the 3RP. Our projects target also local Turkish communities. The refugee program delivers assistance through 8 thematic interventions. The most vulnerable migrants are assisted with cash-based intervention, enabling them to purchase basic items using chargeable cards. The emergency case management, building on existing field operations, supports both individuals and families with specific or complex and multiple assistance needs that are not addressed through existing services. Psychosocial mobile teams, strategically located in the country, provide psychosocial activities for adults and children. Community stabilization delivers refurbishment support of vital community infrastructures, such as schools and parks, to allow for greater possibilities of harmony and interaction between various groups within a community. Livelihood Solutions supports connecting skill sets of migrants to the local labor market, providing training, grants, and mentorships to young entrepreneurial teams made up of Syrian and Turkish students. The team also places skilled Syrian workers in local Turkish businesses and supports with hiring and work permit processes. Other types of assistance include school transportation, 12 children in rural areas accessing education, shelter program, supporting improvement of accommodation and rent agreements with landlords, and municipal migrant and information and coordination centers in Ankara, Adana, Sanliurfa, and Gaziantep. The municipal information centers serve migrant communities. The migration management portfolio implements projects in the following thematic areas: integrated border management, counter-trafficking, labor, migration and human development, Mediterranean response, migrant assistance, migration and health, resettlement and movement management, and the migrant presence monitoring program. Integrated border management programs contribute to the strengthening ongoing government border control operations. The projects are implemented in close coordination with Turkish agencies that are responsible to coordinate and enforce immigration laws at the points of entry, including customs. IOM cooperates with Turkey on counter-migrant smuggling, working with the Ministry of Interior and other agencies and experts on the management of irregular migration, mainstreaming human rights, support to removal centers, return policy, and other critical areas. IOM, in cooperation with the Turkish Coast Guard, is procuring efficient search and rescue vessels, contributing to life-saving operations at sea of the Turkish Coast Guard. The Mediterranean Response Program provides immediate humanitarian services, including provision of food and non-food items and psychosocial support to migrants rescued at sea by the Turkish Coast Guard. The program expanded to the land border with Greece and Bulgaria, with IOM staff based in Edirne, and is planned to expand the same assistance to the eastern borders, Turkey-Iran. Our counter-trafficking program contributes to the implementation of the applicable national legislation, the regulation on combating trafficking and the protection of victims. This includes direct assistance, returns and reintegration of the victims, and structural support to the administrative and legal framework. IOM is cooperating with the relevant authorities in the field of return policy. IOM contributes to the strengthening of the assisted voluntary return and reintegration program and contributes to the strengthening of international cooperation in the field of the readmission policy. Our organization cooperates in the field of labor migration in coordination with relevant authorities in the private sector, supporting policy development and migrant access and migrants to access the labor market in line with economic sectoral needs. Both the refugee and migration management programs are engaged in supporting the implementation of the national harmonization policy. IOM Turkey handles resettlement programs for the refugees and migrants to more than 20 countries, including the USA, Canada, Australia, and the European Union countries. Programs are funded by a number of donors in relevant countries, including the US State Department, Canadian Immigration Service, and the Australian government. The US refugee program is one of the largest continuing activity of IOM and currently operates in over 40 countries. Movement operations include migration and health support services in line with requirements of receiving countries. Lastly, to better understand and address the scale and complexity of the current migration flows to and through Turkey, as well as the stock of refugees and migrants present in the country, IOM has been successfully applying its data collection project to the Turkish context since 2016 through the Npm Program. The Npm Program is the migrant presence monitoring, which stems out of the data tracking metrics of IOM. Notably, Npm focuses on monitoring movements and presence of migrants in Turkey, as well as their profile, immediate needs, reasons of movements, and future intention. The program was established in Turkey in 2016, and IOM signed an exclusive letter of understanding with DGMM in March 2017 to carry out migration data collection in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. I mean, just you have given us the whole picture of how the IOM is operating in Turkey. Thank you very much for this talk. Just when you mentioned the first IOM office in Turkey just established in 1991, actually I remember that day. I visited that office in 1992. I should tell that this was a very simple office, even the quote-unquote very poor office. Then you mentioned that now you have the personnel of more than 1,000 people and the several offices. Also, this shows that how around the world, of course, migration is becoming huge issue, but also it shows that how Turkey-related migration issues, particularly as the Turkey, quote-unquote, becoming a kind of country of immigration, how this shows this picture. So I just want to share this little memory with the whole, how it changed from 1991 to the year 2021. Almost, yeah, exactly 3 decades. Now our last panelist, not least, Ayhan Kaya. I like to invite him to the floor. But before inviting him, just very briefly, I'd like to introduce him to the audience. He's a professor of politics and the Jean Bonnet Chair of European Politics of Interculturalism at the Department of International Relations at Bilgi University, Istanbul. He's also director of the Jean Bonnet Center of Excellence and a member of the Science Academy in Turkey. He's currently conducting a research in the context of European Research Council Advanced Grant as a European Research Council Advanced Grant holder. He received his PhD and the MA degree from the University of Warwick from UK. Yes, again, Ayhan, the floor is yours. Also, thank you to you just for your contribution.
Thank you very much, Ahmet Hocam. Let me also thank you in person and also the MiReKoc staff for organizing and bringing us together. As usual, MiReKoc is doing a fantastic job reaching out many people all around the world through the webinars, unfortunately recently, but before many other conferences you have organized and contributed to the management of migration and integration in Turkey. If you just allow me, I'll just say a few words first about the report itself, and then secondly about the IOM activities in Turkey, and thirdly the challenges that Turkey recently faces and how IOM could contribute to the overcoming of these challenges in the management of migration and migrant integration. Well, as migration scholars, we all very closely follow the reports prepared by the IOM every year, and again this year it has been a very extensive research, a very successful research looking at the current state of migration across the world. Of course, it starts with the depiction of the current crisis situations, starting with Syria, Yemen, Congo, and other countries, including the Rohingya Muslims and also Venezuelan refugees who have become very vulnerable recently. It is great, of course, to see the state of migration retrospectively, because IOM reports start from 2000 and now 2020. We can see, following the track of the IOM, we can see the changing state of migration related phenomena across the world. On the other hand, migration, the IOM reports are not really only focusing on refugees, but it is also reminding us of many other items that we are, in Turkey at least, likely to forget about, namely the migrant labor, remittances, voluntary return, and many other issues that are relevant to migration phenomena in general. And of course, one of the other things that I personally pay attention to is the focus given by the current IOM report on the environmental migration related issues, because this is really one of the issues that needs closer scrutinization by the young researchers, specifically looking at the Southeastern Asia, Eastern and Southern Africa, Pacific Islands, etc., etc. And we also know that it is also very relevant for the Turkish case, as well as for the Syrian refugee, crisis, basically. And the report is not only talking about migration phenomena, but also integration issues are very much prevalent in the report. One of the things which was really fascinating for me is the emphasis on the Mohamed Salah effect in the UK, one of the ways to come to terms with the current rise of Islamophobia, racism, and xenophobia in the Western and European context. Then probably we could also include on top of the Mohammed Salah effect, probably next year there will be Özlem Türeci and Uğur Şahin effect on the positive image of migrants contributing to their societies in terms of sociocultural, economic, sociopolitical, scientific access. And the report is also successfully written in the sense that it touches upon some other recurring issues such as right-wing populism and its impact on the rise of Islamophobia, on the rise of racism, polarization, stigmatization of migrants and refugees, and also the dissemination of all these stereotypical images and thoughts through social media. So these are really, very eloquently discussed in the report. And there are, of course, many other issues covered by the report. I'll just name a couple of others here, such as there is a very strong section on the children and unsafe migrations. And also migration and health is separately discussed. This is also one of the issues that has become, of course, very much prevalent in the pandemic era. And just let me conclude this section by referring to the magnification of Turkey in relation to the protection of child migrants in accordance with the new regulations within the framework of international foreigners and international protection. I would personally expect a bit more, a bit more emphasis, giving some, cases from the Turkish case, giving some details from the Turkish case in terms of narratives, in terms of some more further analysis. This would be my critique to the report, since Turkey is the country with the largest number of refugees. I think it deserves a bit more attention in terms of bringing up the different cases and narratives in the report. Secondly, let me just say a few words about the activities of IOM Turkey. In some of those activities, I have also taken part personally, and I always appreciated working with the IOM, knowing that it has extensively contributed to the management of migration and migrant integration in the Turkish context. For instance, maybe our audience is not aware of, but IOM has been very instrumental in the preparation of the integration strategy document, which was prepared by the Ministry of Interior. And there, IOM took a very active part. This is the first thing. And the second thing, in terms of the activities of the IOM Turkey, is they also brought into our attention the relevance of the local governments in helping the migrants integrate, not only the central government, but also local governments are very influential. I think the most influential in integrating the migrants and refugees. In that sense, IOM has also contributed to the strengthening of this local turn, as we discussed in the academia, in terms of the relevance of the local governments in helping migrants integrate into their social, economic, political spheres of life. And IOM is also very influential in training the Directorate General of Migration Management staff here in Turkey as well as abroad, in terms of training them in understanding the merits of integration. So this is also something to be underlined. And then, of course, there are many other activities undertaken by the IOM. I think the community centers operating in different cities is a very key instrument that is supported by the IOM. So many others, as Tommaso put it more extensively, I'm just gonna stop here and continue with the challenges Turkey has recently. If you just allow me, I'll just say a few words about this. These are the items only which could also be taken by the IOM. I'm sure they are also actively involved in the managing of these items, but probably they need to be more active in helping the Turkish state and local authorities managing migration and migrant integration. As we know, there is this interesting debate among the Turkish state actors about the dependency created by the ESSN program, social integration support program, financed by the European Union, basically. So because of this dependence, it is stated by the state actors that the refugees under the temporary protection, migrants under temporary protection, are less inclined to go for receiving work permits and to become a part of the formal labor market. I wonder if the IOM has anything on their plate to help the revision of the ESSN program together with the European Union and, of course, the Turkish state actors. And the other thing which is being discussed in the Turkish context is the quality of the international migration, international funds supporting the management of migration and integration related issues. So far, a humanitarian assistance-based approach was embraced by international institutions, but at the moment, as migration scholars in Turkey, we are discussing about the need to go through another strategy, which is mainly development-based international assistance strategy. So then this is also falling into the expertise of the IOM, and I think there is a great room to develop there. And the third item that needs to be discussed more by the IOM to help the Turkish authorities tackle migration-related issues is the increasing role of migrant labor in agricultural production, rural spaces and mountainous spaces, because we have so far heavily discussed about migration and migration integration and refugees in particular, as far as the urban context is concerned. But so we mostly discussed about the urban refugees, for instance, in the case of the Syrians, but there are also many other refugees who are living in the rural, mountainous, and agricultural sites, which are often escaping our attention. So probably this could also be raised to offer to the interest of the IOM. I'm presenting all these things as if it is only the IOM active in the field, but we know that there are so many other institutions, international institutions, supporting this processes. And finally, two other important things. I'm a great admirer of the assisted voluntary return principles of the IOM. I think they were introduced back in the 1970s or 80s even. And we also have this debate before the pandemic that there were these involuntary returns to Syria, and I'm sure IOM is taking that into attention, that these returns should be assisted and in compliance with the international migration organizations' principles of voluntary return. And I think there is also a need to improve there. And the other thing is, of course, contributing to Turkey's visibility in international community as the country with the highest number of refugees at the moment in the world. I know that the state actors are really trying hard on this, but because of political situation, because of the pandemic, Turkish state actors cannot really go that far to explain the activities related to the refugees in Turkey to the outside international community. So this is why I underline that there could have been more emphasis on the Turkish case in the international migration report. And finally, there is this growing politics of subsidiarity in managing migration and integration. And as far as we can see, the politics of subsidiarity, or the principle of subsidiarity, is also prevalent in the Turkish case. But unfortunately, the principle of subsidiarity takes place in Turkey in the form of the central state delegating responsibilities to the local actors, to the local municipalities, to the NGOs, and sometimes also to the international institutions. But this doesn't take place in the form of delegating power and also financial resources. So I think another issue that needs to be taken into consideration to help the Turkish state actors is to make sure that this politics of subsidiarity will go in relation to the delegation of responsibilities, as well as the delegation of resources, especially financial resources. So Ahmet, these are my, contributing. These are the things that I wanted to contribute. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to continue the dialogue with the colleagues.
Ayhan, thank you very much. Actually, your talk was excellent, particularly just linking to some discussion points in the report, and bringing also certain items from the Turkey's migratory agenda and linking them together. And it was very complimentary what is already discussed. So thank you very much for this contribution. I mean, I have